안녕하세요. 저는 그레이스입니다. 어제 한국 사철 음식 잔치를 만들었습니다. 맛있었습니다. In other words, hello, my name is Grace. Yesterday I made a traditional Korean temple food feast and it was delicious. So this is part of a competition which is really exciting. For the competition you had to make one traditional Korean temple food dish. I went a bit overboard, but we'll see that very shortly. So, what is temple food? It's a traditional Korean cuisine that is largely plant-based and doesn't use any of the 5 pungent vegetables, which are garlic, onion, spring onion, chives, and leek. Now I'm someone who uses garlic in pretty much everything I've ever made, so it was a bit of a challenge, I will admit. However, I am vegan and I've been vegan since I was born, so having a plant-based challenge was right up my street. As well as that, as you might have been able to tell by the slightly dodgy introduction, I'm currently learning Korean. I love Korean culture. One day I would love to go and teach English in Korea. I've never visited so far, but I can't wait till I finally get to visit. So this is sort of the perfect challenge for me. Vegan/plant-based Korean food. What's not to love? So without further ado, here is the 사찰 음식 잔지를. Now, I started off researching, and oh my gosh, I did so much research. I looked into Buddhism, into Korean temples, and why nuns and monks try to avoid those 5 pungent vegetables. It's actually because it interferes with spiritual clarity, which I found really interesting. All of this research made me want to visit a Korean temple so badly, and I got so hungry imagining all of that amazing plant-based food. I decided to make 11 dishes, and that certainly sounds like a lot, and it did take a long time, but in Korean culture, as opposed to having one large dish, there tends to be a lot of small side dishes which are chosen from. These are known as pancam. Here I am making some kimchi. Now luckily there's a very small Filipino store in my town. If there hadn't been, we would have been in a real pickle because we wouldn't have had the ingredients to make this pickle, which is napa cabbage and radish. Korean temple food is known as slow food because there needs to be a lot of fermentation and aging of ingredients to make up for the lack of pungent herbs like onion and garlic, which tend to add a lot of flavour to the dish. I'll link all of the recipes I used, including the Go Korea Tourism Organisation and any other recipes I used. Here I'm just salting the radish and cabbage and leaving that to soak for around 2 to 3 hours. I made some rice porridge for the kimchi fermentation. Then I moved on to my candied beetroot and radish. I found these adorable pink striped beetroots which were just the cutest thing ever. Here the radishes are candying in the barley syrup and the beetroots are boiling. This is my dough for the noodles. I prepared the night before by making the dough for my dumpling wrappers, as well as making some fruit kimchi with pear, cucumber, apple, fermented in vinegar, salt and sugar. For my grilled potatoes, I put my potatoes on to boil, and the progress of the candied radish was going really nicely. Onto the dumplings. These were a time-consuming process, but I rolled out all the dough to make the wrappers for my dumplings and cut them out into the right shape. I then made my fermented rice porridge using the porridge and chili, ginger and soy sauce. I left this to ferment for about 2 hours. Here the potatoes are just frying up, and I'm stir-frying my courgette and mushroom as the dumpling filling. These are my grilled potatoes and they turned out really nicely. There's a homemade chili sauce and parsley on the top. Filling dumplings is always a bit of a task and they did not turn out perfect by any means, but I think they look cute and homemade, so I was really proud of them. Here they are, ready to be steamed. I moved on to making my kimchi. Here I'm taking the salted cabbage and adding the kimchi sauce after it's fermented for about 3 hours. I'm smearing it on with my hands because that's what you're supposed to do. Then I left my cabbages to ferment in the sauce for a couple of hours until we were ready to eat. I moved on to my tofu dish and fried up the tofu in 1 centimeter slices. I couldn't find any burdock, so I had to use radish and mushroom as the topping. I used chili sauce with this and ginger. This was my dried courgette, stir-fried. I've never made noodles before, but I decided to make them for my homemade gaksu, which is cold noodles and soybean soup. They turned out really thick, but for a first attempt I was really happy. Ta-da! This is the feast! After about 9 hours of planning and cooking, I was so proud to finally have finished. This is my rice porridge with nori seaweed and the kimchi, as well as the homemade hibiscus tea with vegan honey and pine nuts. This is my gaksu, the cold soybean noodles, and my candied radish. This is the tofu with the mushroom and radish and the chili sauce, alongside the grilled potatoes with a homemade chili sauce and parsley, and the dumplings with courgette and mushroom. This is kim seaweed with the same dipping sauce that's with the potatoes, a ginger chili sauce. Here's the courgette, dried out with sesame seeds and stir-fried. And the ssambap, the rice hand rolls with lettuce. This is the candied beetroot and the fruit kimchi. And that is the entire feast. I was so proud of it, and it was all so delicious. It felt so amazing to be eating such healthy, wonderful food. And I'd put so much time and effort into the recipes, so it really paid off. If you have the time yourself, I really do recommend trying out some of these recipes because they're honestly so delicious. And if you haven't tried Korean food before, this is such a great place to start. I've never actually had kimchi before that hasn't had garlic in it, but I still found it just as satisfying and spicy and delicious as ever. My personal favourite dishes were the potato and tofu. I thought those were absolutely amazing and so tasty. I also loved the candied radish and the kimchi. Personally, I'm not a big fan of beetroot, but I actually found that this way it's cooked, I actually really enjoyed it, so I'll definitely be trying the recipe again. If I were to redo anything, I would work on the gaksu noodles, which I think needed to be flatter and thinner, and perhaps I would use something else in the soup other than just the pressed soybean juice and sesame oil. Overall, I found it so wonderful to try this amazing temple food, which perhaps I wouldn't have tried otherwise. I thought it was so delicious, and I can't wait to try it in a real Korean temple one day. Thank you so much for watching. This has been such a treat to film. I hope you enjoyed it. 감사합니다. 안녕.